Wait, what happened?
I can't tell it. I'll gag.
Tell it.
I can't do it. I had a sandwich with a fly in it. I can't do it. I can't. But I took a bite and pulled back, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And then I couldn't. Oh god, I'm gonna gag again. I couldn't eat a sandwich for like a month and a half because it just every time I just thought about that fly.
So, like it was a dead fly in your sandwich. Your eyes were watering.
Oh, it was so bad. It was a very traumatic moment.
That is ridiculous.
Yeah, it was bad.
Rachel, she used to never be able to eat at Which because she went once and saw a rat. I think on the outside of the building in another city. And so she could never could never go to Which.
Sometimes things like that happen and it like, it sets you off course of what you're doing.
Rachel and Whitney both have a horrible like you'll start gagging.
Yes.
You'll
it's just certain things, certain smells, certain
We were
words.
at dinner one time.
No.
We were at dinner one time with this couple, the four of us and this other couple, and the lady had horrible bad breath. We now refer to it as dragon breath. And her breath was so bad that somehow mid-dinner, I moved seats. I traded seats with Aaron because I couldn't take it anymore. But Aaron didn't know why. And so Aaron traded seats with me. Then he's just in the waft zone of I haven't brushed my teeth since 1987. And so on the drive home, the four of us start talking about it, and Rachel and Whitney start fake puking, and they got to hang their heads out the window.
Ooh, yeah, why are you trying to publicly shame me with all of my gagging? But it's true. There's certain things I cannot.
Watch. Pus.
No, there's certain words and certain boogers and all. I can't do it. Blood is fine. I can do all that all day. But the other types of bodily fluids,
I can't do blood.
Nope.
Rachel can watch surgery shows.
Yeah, we love it.
No,
Rachel and I both are good with that. But the other types of bodily fluids, I cannot handle. Whew.
Okay, so if you want to freak Whitney out, put a bug in her sandwich.
It's traumatic.
After she's taken a bite.
What happens?
Okay, it's traumatic.
And that's what we're going to talk about today. Is that on the Tug of More, as we're tugging into more, the truth is we all face traumatic moments, and they're not funny.
No, not
like
at all.
flies in a sandwich. They're not like dragon breath, I wish, was the most traumatic thing that we've ever faced.
All right, let's jump into it.
Okay, go.
This is a Tug of More.
Yes.
It's a conversation between two friends.
That's right.
About how we want to pull in to something great.
We're right here, and we know that we're supposed to be over here, and there is a fight and a tension to get there. And so it takes work, it takes effort, it takes tugging into more.
And that fight to tug into more is met with opposition.
Absolutely.
Opposition means hard, difficult, struggling things.
Why?
There's dudes mowing the lawn right outside the building.
And it's hard.
It's hard, and so we've had to start the episode over multiple times because it sounds like there's a Harley Davidson in the bathroom. But we're gonna tug into more.
That's right.
So if you hear some background noise,
sorry, that's what it is.
That's what it is.
But I think that for me, for a lot of years of my life, I did not think that I even had faced trauma. But then I had to recognize, oh wait, some of these things have been hard. They've affected how I see people, how I see circumstances. They've knocked me off course in the same way that like I did not want to eat a sandwich for multiple months when I had a fly in mine. I did not want to face certain people or certain circumstances because of trauma of things I had faced in other times of my life. And so we have to look at trauma in our life as leaders and learn how to walk through it and face it and keep going.
The drama of trauma.
The drama of trauma. It's drama.
I think what you said is really great. I didn't think that I had ever experienced trauma because like I'd grown up in a pretty, my parents are incredible and I grew up going to church. And so, and I kind of didn't really hit any seasons of trauma until my like mid 20s.
Yeah.
And then just stuff started going kind of haywire in some areas.
Right.
And that trauma came and it really influenced me. And so we always ask for people to let us know if there's any questions.
Right.
And so we've been getting a bunch of questions that are kind of in alignment with this idea.
Consistently, people are asking things about like, hey, as I'm tugging into more, maybe my dream has suddenly like been taken from me is what it feels like. Maybe life circumstances have shifted and what I've been tugging towards, I don't even know if I'm supposed to keep tugging towards it. Other people have talked about, some really hard things they've watched other people in their life walk through, and they don't really know how to answer to it or help or be a part of it. We get the question a lot about like, how do you keep going? How do you deal with the trauma? And what do you do to like really be able to look at it and go, I still have great purpose. My life is still full of greatness. There's still more that I'm tugging into. And so we just thought it'd be worth talking about today, because for us as friends, like you and I, but then our spouses, Aaron and Rach, the four of us together over the last decade have all walked through some sort of trauma together. And we've talked about it before that like, we're super grateful that we had the friendship to help us walk through it. But we each had to learn individually and then together collectively how to navigate that trauma. And it was different for everybody.
Yeah.
And the season was different, but some of the strategy was still very similar.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important conversation.
Yeah. So first, let's just define it quickly.
Yeah.
What is trauma?
Yeah.
What is it? Because I think that it's something that's different for everybody.
Yeah.
Because like Titus fell off the bed and got hurt. That's the most traumatic thing that's ever happened in his whole life.
Right.
So for him,
right,
that was
traumatic.
But for my wife, who grew up in poverty and homelessness and abuse, her experience of trauma is very different.
Absolutely. But I think for anyone, it's a hard jarring of regular circumstances. And like you said, I think it's measured when you compare to other people. You might say, oh, well, I haven't faced anything traumatic. But if there is a marked moment in your life where something significant shook you, whether it altered something physically, whether it altered something in a memory,
emotionally,
in an emotion, in
financial.
Yeah, it could be a time where, that marked moment, changed some things. It changed whether it changed actual tangible things or it changed some things in you.
Yeah.
We have to really look at it.
Okay, so the question we're wrestling with is how to keep tugging into more while navigating
the trauma.
Yeah. I think first is to admit that what happened was traumatic.
Yes.
Like for me, I went through some traumatic stuff in my late 20s or early 30s.
Yeah.
That was like an existential crisis of like my call, of what God was doing, of the plan that I thought that I had.
Yeah.
Of like
your 5-year plan of life, your 10-year plan of life.
Just got rocked. Like relationships that I had literally invested my entire adulthood into got
shifted drastically.
Destroyed.
Yeah.
And so some people would look at that and go, man, that's not traumatic, dude. You didn't get your arm chopped off or molested, or you didn't have to, I declare bankruptcy. You know, you didn't have one of those kind of things. But for me,
absolutely.
Dude, that was super traumatic.
Yeah.
For like, I'd given my whole life this direction, and then the rug got pulled out. And I think when I was finally able to admit to a counselor, I mean, my counselor had to talk to me about it for weeks.
Right.
To talk me into believing, like, hey, it's okay to say ouch.
Yeah.
And like for me, I refused to say ouch.
Yeah.
I refused to say this affected me.
Right.
I wouldn't admit, dude, that hurt really, really bad.
Right.
And when I finally admitted that what I had walked through was really affecting my day-to-day life, then I could begin to heal.
Yeah.
Some people call everything trauma. Stop it.
Yeah.
Like if you got
that is drama. That is drama.
Like if you got a speeding ticket, that's not trauma.
Right.
If your latte's wrong, that's not. I'm saying like people say they got fired from a job because they didn't show up to work on time for a month.
Yeah.
That's not trauma.
Right. Absolutely.
But there are things that happen that on the other end of the spectrum, there's people who never who never will want to admit they're bleeding.
Yeah.
And when I finally admitted, like, dude, I'm hurting really bad from this, is when I could really start to heal.
No, it's really good. I think for me in this season, when my parents got divorced, I had grown up believing and knowing that like that's not an option in marriage. This is what we do. This is how we will live our life. And it shook so many foundational things, not even
deep foundational
things, not to mention like the season of what they walked through and what that caused emotionally and all that. But just the simple, like, this decision was made was so foundationally rocking for me that it took me a long time to admit that it then started making me have a whole bunch of questions about my own marriage, my own life. I'd been married about 10 years at that time, and I started projecting it onto Aaron so hard, but it took me about 6 months to actually admit that that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
Because I was like, no, I'm not. I'm fine. This is fine. We will make it through. They're in a hard season. I'm okay. Like, but recognizing that, like, when you hit a traumatic moment, when you hit some life shifting, altering thing, if you don't admit this is affecting me, it actually can affect things worse. It affects the people around you. It affects the way you lead. It affects the way you live life and the tug into more. For me, I went into like a weird, like, hidden depression that it was like I could smile on the outside, but at home I was just empty and on zero and like not there. And so in my home life, I was just kind of a mess. And it was like until I was willing to say, this is hard and I need help, I was stalled out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, how to tug into more while navigating trauma.
Yeah.
Like, maybe for you, it's admitting, like, what happened.
Absolutely.
Happened.
That it happened, and that it caused a lot of pain. Yeah.
It really hurt, and that it is affecting you. That's back into the self-awareness piece of like, okay, I'm acting like this over here,
right,
because of what's happened over here. Right. I'm angry to that person because I'm hurt by
this person,
by that person. And for me, I had a couple moments where I was acting out that I realized, oh yeah, I'm not okay. I've told a story before about how I literally got into a fight with a guy in the middle of a street.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I yelled at this guy, "Tell me you're sorry." That's a very weird thing to come out of the guttural response of my soul. It was because I was yelling at somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so identifying those markers.
Absolutely.
Of like, dude, I'm losing my junk. Pastor Whitney's talked about how she got pictures in the mail wrong and like they were bent and you started freaking out, losing your crap over it. Has nothing to do with the pictures. Okay. So like, first, whoever asked the question obviously knows. A bunch of people ask the same question. Y'all know that you have some trauma, but maybe there's others that are still in that delusion of I'm fine.
Yeah.
No. You've got to admit it.
Absolutely.
And then once we admit like what happened has really affected me, I think the next step is to deal with it.
Absolutely.
Start dealing with it. And it's not always just a one-time prayer.
Right. Or one-time conversation.
Or one-time like, I see this hurt and now I'm over it. There's layers. It's an onion.
Absolutely. Well, we have learned behaviors our whole life, or we have learned strategies for coping and things. But when trauma hits, it can shake up some of those things. And so now we have this new way that we're handling the circumstances, and unlearning and relearning something is actually harder. And so like I have to unlearn some of this pattern of behavior or emotion or whatever it is that's happened, and start to set a new strategy. And man, it's tough, but you have to be intentional. We had to set like other people around us to say, hey, when you see me starting to like redline,
really good.
Help me out, like make my husband aware, but then make some other people in my life aware, be vulnerable to say like, this is a struggle. Sometimes our trauma is something that we've caused. Sometimes it's something that someone else has caused.
Yep.
And so identifying like our part in it, whether it's just my reaction to it or whether it's what I was a part of, will help us as we navigate. But man, if we want to keep going and not just completely stop, we have to put real guardrails, boundaries in place for this is how I'm going to go while I'm walking through that healing.
You said a lot of great stuff there. I want to backtrack to one of the pieces. Like, so we've got to deal with the trauma that came in. I remember when Rachel and I, in one of our other houses, we lived in Houston, our sink leaked.
Right.
And our sink leaked, and it got like everything under the sink all wet. And so I remember like trying to air it out, and I pulled everything out and I put a fan in and I blew the fan.
Yeah.
And it kind of like dried up, but the house, it still stunk. You know, it had that like musty, mildewy smell.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, crap. And so all of the particle board underneath the sink started to swell up, you know how it does. And so I had to get a hammer and I had to start cutting breaking the board out. And then when I broke the board out, I saw that the water had gotten into the sheetrock behind the cupboard, and now I had to cut that out. And then I saw that that sink had been leaking for years, and the footer of the foundation of the house was all rotten. And like it turned into an extensive repair. But that's what sometimes you have to do, is you have to dig through the layers of like, you have to take all the crap out of the sink and take the little paper off the board and cut the board out and cut some of the wall out. And oh man, now I'm getting a Sawzall. And then I had to put bleach on it all. Then I had to dry it all out. Then I had to put new wood back in. Then I had to paint it. Then it was fixed. And I think sometimes what we do with trauma is we just try to paint it. We just want to paint over it with the new car or this new fashion or this new look or a hairdo or a new girlfriend. We want to just paint over it. But man, the what is the word you used? The mold.
The mildew.
The mildew. The mold is still up in there. It's festering.
And what you said is so good in that, in your unpacking. So yes, when you're going to walk through trauma, it's going to take more pain, more struggle, more strife, more difficulty to undo it. But then in it, you're inevitably going to unpack some other residual of old trauma that you didn't realize. For me, that's where I thought, until I hit that moment, I thought, oh, I haven't really faced any trauma. But as I started unpacking it, I realized actually part of why this is so big in my life is because it's connected to this that's happened and this that's happened and this, and being willing to unpack all of it. It took a journey and it was painful, but in the end it was better, because inevitably that mildew will come back. It will spread more. It will do more damage. And it will cause, mold and mildew in your house, it will make you sick. And it will make you and everyone around you sick.
It'll cause black mold to grow. It'll make your house uninhabitable. And I think some people are relationally uninhabitable. They can't make a friend. They can't get a job. They can't step into the more God has, because there's mildew over in this area. And it's like, if you would just get the sledgehammer and the Sawzall and go to counseling and pull that garbage out, whether your fault or somebody else's fault, then you could start to heal. Okay, so somebody sees there's trauma, knows there's an issue. There's some mildew in their mind or their heart. What are a couple steps? Because we're going to try to get to how to keep tugging anymore. But what are a few like pieces to help somebody get that stuff out?
So the first one I had to understand is that in the midst of all of this, God is still God. He is still good. His plan for my life is still true. And that just because I or someone else kind of screwed anything up, like, don't forget that, like, that's the firm foundation. I, in my life, am very relational. And so for me, other people were parts of the foundation of my life. And I had to recognize, now, wait a minute. Even without any of them, like, I'm okay, because God is God. That's a huge piece. And like, he didn't cause all this. He's just a dude. Or God is God, but these people are just a dude. My dad is a dude. My mom is a lady, and like, they're just people who made mistakes.
They're just trying.
So they're just doing their best. And so, like, understanding that, like, humans are gonna fail. I'm gonna fail. It's a huge piece. So then the steps to go, what you already said, admitting it, talking it out, making a new plan, and then being disciplined to hold to that. To say, like, because I said it, like, I started lashing out in my marriage and saying things I would have never said, pushing him away in ways I never would have done before. And I had to say, I will not do that anymore. Because this has been a new pattern because of my pain. But you know what? I don't believe that these things are going to happen in my marriage. But I can become a self-fulfilling prophecy if I keep pushing it and saying things I shouldn't. And so instead, it's not allowed anymore. And I think so often, because of our trauma, we we allow some things because we're like, well, we or they just walked through such a hard thing that I don't want to push too hard, or I don't want to push myself too hard. No, that's not allowed anymore. Like, get your junk together and say, I'm going to start having a new behavior.
It's so, I mean, what you just said is so good. It's creating a new precedent, creating a new, like, moving forward, here's how I'm shifting.
Yeah.
I've probably got a dozen friends that their trauma is a sexual affair in their marriage. Maybe more than a dozen, maybe 100, a lot.
Yeah.
So, and like those traumas, there's an element of like forgiveness too.
Yeah.
You gave an incredible list of like, we're not going to do that, and we're going to identify it, we're going to deal with it. But then like, to really get past it, there has to be a moment that's like, I'm going to stop reliving being mad.
Yeah.
So like for you could stay mad at a parent.
Yeah.
For me, I could stay mad at people from my past. For a person who's walked through a fair, you could stay mad for what the decisions they made. If someone spent money that you could stay mad. But there's a point that like, that's just you keep leaking water.
Right.
And you're now feeding the mold.
Yeah. You have to say, if I'm going to move forward, I choose to forgive and be what you just said, let it go.
Yeah.
So that I can keep going. And so, whether you're staying in relationship with people, whether it's forgiving a circumstance that happened, you got to do it. You got to. It's super important.
There's got to be a moment where you're also willing to open up about what happened.
Yeah, for sure.
You've got to open up.
Absolutely.
And whether that's to a counselor, to trusted friends in a community, to a pastor, you've got to open up.
Absolutely. And be willing to, I think within recognizing one thing for me, I know for both of us, that was key in that season of healing, was going, okay, now that I've opened up, now that I'm making the steps, so I'm setting some new precedents, but also I'm not going to drastically change anything in my life that doesn't have anything to do with that trauma.
God.
Like, I'm going to stay in my church. I'm going to stay connected. I'm not going to sell my house in the middle of, like, we've seen people who've walked through some traumatic moments in life, and they just eject on everything in life instead of like, no, you got to face this. This is the only bandwidth for change I have right now.
God.
I need everything else to stay stable and structured, and I can't trust my emotions right now. So I can't, in that season for me, you guys were super influential in my life of like, speak truth to me. And there were plenty of times that I could have got offended at what you were saying, but I had to remember, wait, these people have loved me and known me, and they're just trying to help me. And so keeping close to what I know is what helped me get past the pain.
We try to, it would be like if I saw my leaky sink and the mold under there, and then I go and try to rip out the cupboards in my bathroom.
Right.
This is what people do many times, is instead of dealing with the smaller piece, they start changing a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
We're going to move cities. I'm going to quit my job.
Right. Yeah.
You know how many people that I know that have quit a job because their marriage isn't, they leave a church because something happened with their kids at school. Like these, I don't want to say stupid because that's insensitive, but these like unwise moves.
Yeah. They're emotionally volatile decisions.
Yeah.
They're not based in like actual
when you're hurting,
logic. Yeah.
When you're hurting, we don't think right.
Well, you've said it before that like when you get punched, there's a bruise.
Yeah.
And then everything that touches you hurts in that area. And like your whole life hurts.
Yeah.
So the temptation can be to like shift everything.
Yeah.
But that's not what you need to do.
You and I were talking the other day about like we've now kind of survived through COVID.
Yeah.
And that the last 2 years have been traumatic on everybody for 35 reasons.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I think like for those of us, man, who've been leading through that season, we've been like just struggling to hold on and like to get through. And I think something I read that brought up the conversation with us is that there's actually this wave now of people. We're seeing the after effects of it. You know how like when there's an earthquake, then there's like the aftershock.
The aftershock.
And I, we don't live in California, so I've never really have experienced or understood that. But when there's a traumatic moment, you have to embrace and understand that there's an aftershock coming. And for a lot of people around us, a lot of leaders we know, a lot of people, we're seeing it in our church context. We're seeing a lot of pastors that are resigning from their churches, a lot of people that are stepping away from the ministry they've known, but it's because they were holding on to this trauma for so long and like just trying to get through it. You remember how we would be like, oh man, it's been this many weeks. We're getting on the other side of it. We're getting out and like gritting and bearing it and gritting our teeth, whatever it is, to like just get through it. But right now we're seeing the aftershock of the trauma of that season. And you can kind of see who was emotionally prepared for it and who wasn't. Because there are some people right now who are just walking through massive depression, massive life shifts, massive just emotions. And I thought it was maybe because of what we've been walking through, I thought, this is just the nucleus of our journey and our story and our relationships around us and people we know. But I'm reading and finding that it's actually a national, global thing that's happening of people now going, man, I faced that. And now everything is just starting to crumble.
Yeah.
Because there's only so much we can bear and handle as humans.
Yeah.
If we don't deal with it when it's happened. Like you said, eventually your whole kitchen sink, like that whole area would have become rotten.
Yeah.
And truthfully, you said uninhabitable.
Yeah.
But when we aren't paying attention to those things and really working through them in the midst of it, it will catch up to us eventually.
And I think that for a lot of people that are now 2 years post the COVID stuff, the reason that now it's all showing is because they had undealt with issues before COVID started.
Absolutely.
And so there was all this like non-health.
Yeah.
in them, and then they've just been in this 2 year, we got to just get through this.
Yeah.
And then now all that's exacerbated and it's grown and it's turned into a monster in their life. And so things are just erupting. You mentioned a second ago, and I know sometimes on the podcast I go quiet because I'm just chewing. She says something that gets me chewing 10 different directions. But you talked about how like the punch and then the bruise happens. When you refuse to deal with something that happened, you're then hypersensitive.
Absolutely.
And so sometimes people, the reason that the COVID stuff is killing them is not because of the COVID stuff.
Right.
It's because we're just hypersensitive
to everything.
To everything else.
Yeah.
We've had people leave the church for not what happened at why they left the church.
Right.
There's all these other giant things they didn't deal with.
Right.
And then COVID exacerbated their hurt. And then one little tiny, the straw broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
And they're imploding.
Yeah.
And it's really hard.
Well, you just said it. Things they weren't. These were not really the reasons. It was really these reasons. But the problem was they weren't willing. They were afraid.
Yeah.
They were unsure of.
They
what
were too busy painting than
and
cutting
so
out.
it's like you've got to really deal with it. If you're walking through a traumatic thing and it's bringing question to your mind and heart about your future, about if you're not actively actually asking that somewhere else to help bring logic and wisdom to it, eventually it's going to get you. Go.
Okay. So that's the intro for like the kind of bigger idea.
Yeah.
The questions that we've got a bunch of are how do we keep tugging into more through trauma?
Yeah.
And like we just really directly said, first you have to deal with the trauma.
Right.
Deal with your junk.
Yeah.
If you don't deal with it, then nothing's going to happen. And then I think for me, and you'll probably have a bunch of different options. For me, it's either step back for a moment or put it in a box and lead.
Yeah.
So like Rachel and I, so there's those two areas.
Right.
So remember when Rachel and I were going through a hard time, it was based out of trauma from her childhood.
Yeah.
That then when Lily and our daughter got old enough and now I was not just her husband, but a dad who could hurt a little girl.
Yeah.
Rachel didn't even realize that for a while. And it caused a bunch of tension in our marriage. This is 4 years ago.
Yeah.
A lot of tension in our marriage. We were having a hard time. And so I remember showing up to a staff meeting one day, not okay.
Yeah.
Not okay. And I kept saying, I'm good. We can lead the staff meeting. We can do it. Let's go. We can have staff meeting. And I remember you said, hey, friend, go home.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I don't do that a lot.
No.
I'm not a like lay down and whine about it guy.
Right.
But that was a unmanageable, emotional thing I was going through. That the best thing for the organization was for me to bow out for a minute.
For a minute, right.
This was not I resigned my call or my church. This was a like, dude, everybody knows I'm pretending.
Yeah.
They don't know why.
Yeah.
This is not our culture. Now, some churches, their culture is all pretend.
Right.
Everybody in the room could tell pastor's not okay.
Yeah.
And so what was way better was for me to like step back for a minute.
There's a lot to say in that because I think it could have been a temptation for some to say, oh, we're having a hard time, so we're going to just step out completely. What you said. It was for a minute. It was for a day. It was for, take a vacation, take a step back. We've talked about like seasons of just high stress where it's like, hey, we need to take a break for a minute. But what happens instead, I think sometimes people feel like, oh, I am the only one who's ever faced trauma, so this is so heavy and horrible
this
that
is impossible.
I could not possibly lead anymore, and they just completely eject from. I'm watching it. I've seen it on social media. Several pastors, like highly influential people, who are leaving and stepping down, and I'm like, wait a minute, was that necessary, or was it just you needed to take a vacation for a minute or take a break for a minute to really deal with it? And so you took a step down, out for a minute to handle it, because the truth was, in me telling you, hey, it's time to go home, was not me shaming you or saying, ooh, get out of here with your trauma. It was protecting you and protecting the people around you. It's a necessary thing to take a step back and to say, hey, hang on. It protects you and the other people.
It's okay for a season to throttle down.
Yes.
We're talking Tug of More. We're talking pulling into doing great things. But one of the best things you can do is put the truck in the garage and pull the motor out and do some work.
Absolutely.
Like Aaron. Yeah. Aaron had a tragedy that he walked through the tragic death of a loved one.
Right.
And through that season that he was carrying that, Aaron's Whitney's husband. Yeah. While he was carrying that, it was okay for him to not be okay for a minute.
Yeah.
And we all knew it.
Yeah.
It was okay to not go to dinners and laugh for a minute.
For a minute. And even
it was okay for him to just sit home.
Yeah.
And be in a funk.
Right. No, even at his work, they said, if you need to take a day, or if you're in a meeting and like you space out for a second, I'm understanding. But it's for a moment, not consistently.
And so like, if you've walked through or are currently actively walking through trauma or are like in counseling for the first time, you want to talk about one of the most exhausting things is to jump into counseling and actually start dealing with the crap.
Yeah.
Because it all gets brought back up. It's all in your mind.
Yeah.
I would rather do a 3-hour workout than a 1-hour counseling session, energy wise.
Yeah. No, I always tell people it will be horrible the first couple times.
But you got to push through.
But you got to push through it, and then it will be great. So that's super important.
Yeah. So
don't be afraid to pause for a moment, but be careful not to eject from your whole life.
Okay. So how do we tug into more?
Yes.
It's all a long intro for
keep going.
This.
Yeah.
Once you finally start working on getting healthy from what happened.
Right.
You then can learn to start to compartmentalize your trauma from your call.
Right.
I was able to anyways.
Yeah.
And I think all of us were able to.
Absolutely.
Okay, now I'm tugging. Now I'm pulling into more. Now I'm leading. Now I'm doing all these things.
Right.
Once I knew, okay, I'm going to counseling on Mondays at 4 p.m. Once I knew, okay, I'm going to go talk with my friends at dinner about this subject that I've already told them I need help with.
Yeah.
Once I know, okay, me and Rachel are going to work on this. Here's what we're doing. This is the compartment of my trauma dealing.
Right.
How to get over it.
Right.
then the rest of my life I was able to compartmentalize. Now it's time to lead.
Yeah.
Once I know I'm allowed and I'm going to cry here, I can bleed here.
Yeah.
Then I could lead over here.
Yeah. I think that there is a proper timing of like, there's going to be moments where you think you're fine, and then also, like, depending on what the trauma is, where you may have a moment where you break down. But what you're saying is after a certain point of like, okay, now I am dealing with it. Now I'm taking care of it. Then you know the times, you know the places, and what you have to convince your mind and heart to do is to say, that's where it is that I'm going to deal with it.
Yeah.
I'm not going and
this is not my life. This is not my new identity.
Correct.
Is I'm broken.
Yes.
I'm damaged.
And for the people around you that are helping you through it, same. They have to be aware of like, it was not right for me on a Tuesday right before staff meeting to be like, how's things going?
You okay? Tell me.
You okay? Right. Or when Aaron was walking through his hard time, for me to call him right before his staff meeting and be like, how you feeling today? You okay? I just thinking of
Have you thought about what happened lately?
But I know and have known people who it becomes not only them who can't compartmentalize, but the people in their life that are not compartmentalizing too. And so like, get your team to help you and in that. And so compartmentalize it, understand it, and really and truly, once you've set those times, you know, I'm going to deal with it. Like, we're going to handle it. When we were walking through that hard season in our, because of what I had faced with my family, then in our marriage caused some issues. There was like disagreements I wanted to have that I didn't need to have because let's hold that for a counseling conversation.
Let's wait for a mediator.
Let's wait for a moment where I can get some clarity of, is this really real, or is this my bad perception right now?
There's so much to talk about with it. Like, what we do many times, what people can do is they can now build this new identity of themselves, of someone who's walked through trauma, and it makes them unable to accomplish anywhere.
Yeah.
But if you would just have spaces and places and people where you're working on what happened and what hurt, then you can step into the more over here.
Right.
But when we don't, we just muddy the waters everywhere, we're a tornado.
Well, our expectation then is for, like I said, we build a team, counselor, friends, whatever. But our expectation when we don't compartmentalize it is that everyone should be on the team. And so then anyone who asks us to do anything hard or any moment where we have to lead, they're like, don't they understand what I'm walking through? No, you're a leader. Go lead. They can't understand and they shouldn't understand.
Yeah.
And so like the right places, the right spaces, the right people, keep it over here so that you can keep doing all of this.
There's a person at our church who Rachel and I are connected to and like we super love. And not too long ago, this person got mad at us and pulled us aside and kind of yelled at us a little bit on a Sunday. And I had to not physically shake them, but be like, hey, you're hurt from a lot of years of life.
Yeah.
And what you're yelling at me has nothing to do with
nothing
to do with me. We've been telling you need to go to counseling to deal with these things. It was in your last relationship. Yeah. It's about to be in your new relationship. It's affecting your kid. And now you're about to literally eject on your entire church life community because of the silliest thing.
Right.
And trauma, what it wants to do is invade everywhere.
Yeah.
It wants to, like water, leak into every possible opening
and ruin everything.
Yeah. We have to build a box that it gets put in where it's dealt with.
Yeah.
Or we're never going to be able to pull into more.
Absolutely.
Like, I know pastors who are leading great churches that have had children pass away.
Yeah.
Who have had spouses die.
Yeah.
Who have had massive health issues. Yeah. But when they're able to say, okay, I'm going to work on it here and I'm going to lead here. Yeah. I'm going to put God in both.
Yeah. I think an important piece is recognizing, so just because your trauma might not be as big as someone else's doesn't mean it doesn't need to be dealt with equally. But depending on the size of the trauma, might need a day or 3 days or a month, depending on what it is. So be intentional to give yourself that right space. But then once you start that healing, don't go back to that season. And then, man, in the midst of it, you've set your team. And I said it before in like my pain of not like emotionally volatilely making decisions. But I think not just that, but like it was right for me to come to wisdom to y'all, because I knew you were already trusted and approved in my life in other seasons. Mm-hmm. It would have been not wise for me to go start getting other people that I didn't know. Any other people that, what do y'all think? Let me tell you what. Sometimes our trauma. The other day I met someone that I don't really know well, but I just kind of said, "How are you?" And they just started telling me everything. And you know, I think because of their relational connection to someone else I know, like they know I'm a pastor, they know, and they're telling me, and that happens as pastors a lot. But you may vomit all your things to somebody that you don't know what they actually believe. Mm-hmm. You don't know the core of their wisdom, if it aligns with what you actually want. I've known and seen so many people who will start, man, I don't know, how could God allow this? And they start researching all these things and reading not just the Bible, but all this other commentary. It's like, wait a minute, you weren't invested in that commentary before. It can start to shift your healing if you bring in new untrusted voices, right, new content that has nothing to do with what you really want in life. Stick with what you know in the midst of your healing. Stick with what's trusted. Yeah. And be stable in it.
All words are not wisdom.
True.
But a lot of people got words.
And even all perspective is not wisdom.
How many times have we had people in our church who are going through marriage drama? How many times has this happened? Where the wife will then go and talk to all the girls that she runs with, and the dude will go talk to all his buddies at Buffalo Wild Wings at 2 a.m. around a bunch of drinks, and they come out of that wisdom from the girl goes and talks to all her divorced friends, and the guy talks to all his buddies that are all sleeping with everybody they can.
Right.
And then they come back and they decide we're going to get divorced.
Right.
Wait a second. You just sought counsel from people who are not successful.
You sought counsel from people who have already made the decision that you're not wanting to actually make.
Right.
And so like, no, wait a minute. No, go to the right trusted place. The people that you want your life to emulate, those you've watched carry trauma well. And that's where you should be. Not in these places. It can feel better to have other people on your side. Oh yeah, you should feel that way. And
it feels good for a minute to have somebody stroke your ego.
Right.
Of like, yeah, you deserve. Yeah. This is unfair. Listen, in trauma, that's the other piece. You can only throw rocks for so long. Yeah. And then eventually it's your problem.
It is, right.
I know they did you wrong. I know somebody didn't protect you and they hurt you and they did you wrong. They're a loser. Okay. But at some point, you have to pick up responsibility for your own healing.
Yeah. No, it's
This
really
is
good.
Super broad.
No, it's super broad, and not because we've gotten so many questions from so many different angles. But I think understanding that, like, you can keep going even while you're healing, or even while you're still waiting for the solution to whatever trauma you're facing. But it's possible.
Yeah, a little encouragement. Nothing can stop God's plan.
Right.
So, like, if whatever your experience of hurt is, you think it's stopped you. You think, why keep tugging? There's no way I can make progress. That's a lie from the devil. Yeah. Nothing can stop God. God can do more in one moment than you could do in a lifetime of work.
Absolutely.
He can do it. Keep believing in the dream that he's given you. Keep pushing to succeed. We're facing situations right now that are bigger than what we know how to do.
Absolutely.
We don't know the answers and how to figure it all out, and I feel smaller. I feel smaller than the problems ahead of me.
Yeah.
But I have to encourage myself and remind myself God has something bigger and better than I could ever imagine.
And remembering that it's not always going to be this way, I think is such an important piece of it.
It doesn't always hurt this bad.
It won't always hurt like this. You will get on the other side of this, and you will have fresh perspective, tomorrow at a future date and time. And so, like, just keep swimming, but keep going, and don't eject on your calling. Don't eject on the thing that you are tugging into. Yeah. Don't allow yourself to leave the circumstances because of this, because you are going to face hard things again.
Yeah.
So you might as well learn how to get on the other side of it now. Yeah.
So the quick recap.
Yes.
Identify it.
Yep.
Admit that it hurt.
Right.
Create a plan to,
Get a plan.
to deal with it.
Yeah.
Deal with it in trusted sources.
Right.
Give yourself time to get your legs under you for a minute. It's okay to be hurt for a minute. And then once it's compartmentalized, lead.
Yeah. Get back to it. Right.
Believe that God still has more and you can still get there.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's good.
Dude, so good. Love you guys. I know it was a heavy one. And I hope that we answered the many questions we've got on that idea of trauma. If you have any others, hit us up. If you need help finding counseling, ask us.
Yeah.
We'll help you we'll do our best to help you find a Christian counselor to step into some areas of healing.
Absolutely. Love y'all.
See ya.